Everyone is afraid of AI, Thomas. I'm afraid of AI. You're afraid of it. And if you say otherwise, you're lying. We're all afraid of it because right now you either feel threatened by it, you feel thrilled by it, or it's likely both. We are all afraid of AI, myself included. These things are able to do so many more things way better, way faster, way cheaper than we can do as humans. So what we have to understand is the painter hated the photographer hated the Photoshopper hates the AI generated image, right? We're in this thing now where your generation hates overproduced content that I look at, 8K, perfect stuff, perfect makeup. You want real, you want authentic, right? And then Gen Alpha doesn't want to see AI slop. They don't want to see AI generated content. They want to see pimples and mistakes and things falling down all over the place, right? So I think what's happening is that people are revolting against AI in a lot of cases. So I think that like anything, everything in life is about moderation. It's about finding and tuning the dials on what's right for you, your customer, your business, your market.
Before we dive into today's episode, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us grow and inspire more people on their journeys. Thank you. Hello, Pete. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Yeah, good to be here.
So, Pete, for those who don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am Pete Sena. I am an entrepreneur. I have been building companies for 23 years.
I've seen, Pete, I read it on your website, a bit of your background, and it says that you started coding when you were young, assembling PCs and stuff like this. So when I was reading that, it sounds to me like one of those biographies that you read or movies that you watch. And I'm sure that it's like a long and exciting story, but can you briefly tell us a bit about yourself when you were younger and tell us some highlights or milestones?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing I would say is it's not that glamorous of a story. I was just a, 80s baby growing up in Southern Connecticut, which is where I'm from. And I remember when my dad got his income tax check and spent his entire check on buying a computer. And I remember this thing just sitting in our house. And that's when my whole life changed. I was a big video gamer at the time. I was just a kid. And I learned that if I wanted to make video games, I would have had to learn how to code. And if I learned how to code, well, then I need to actually have the games have artwork or design or interfaces. So it wouldn't just be black screen, green text or white text. So I did whatever, kid back then does, got my hands on a cracked copy of Adobe Photoshop. Thanks, Adobe. I pay them lots of money now. And really just kind of taught myself how to design, taught myself how to code, started making video games when I was a kid. And then that's kind of where it began. So not a sexy special story. It was just, I spent way too many years playing N64 and I was like, I want to make video games. And as most of us, we follow our curiosity and that leads to things.
That is true. And what was your idea of your future career back then?
I'll be candid. I didn't have a plan back then. I wanted to be, I wanted to make video games or do something interesting. And then ultimately after school, I didn't find the thing I was looking for. So I created something myself. And, ultimately I always just wanted to be in a creative career where I could, make things that people find useful or interesting. And that's what I dedicated most of my life to.
And if I'm not mistaken, you started your business still while at school, right?
I did, yeah. So I had a full-time job and then I managed to convince them to let me use them as a client. So I left as a full-time employee. Back then we didn't have side hustles. It was either you had a job or you worked for yourself. It was one or the other. I don't really like binary. I'm an and guy, not an or guy. And yeah, I started my first company, Digital Surgeon, still around to this day. It's a fantastic brand experience firm. We do great design branding. That was my first company. I started that, I think I was 19. And while I was still at University of Connecticut. So when everyone was watching all the cool basketball games and doing all the stuff and we were winning championships, I was just a punk kid sitting in front of two screens rattling away.
And it's impressive that the business is still around. As I had a look as well, it looks great. And since we have audience that might be still at universities or at school or early in their careers, based on your experience, what will be like advice if someone is in a similar situation and they are about to start enter professional career and maybe start their own business? So you got a lot of experience and maybe what you learned, or based on your career, what would you recommend to people?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of bad advice out there. So the thing that I would say is you have to know yourself first and foremost. And that was something I didn't know, right? So I didn't really know myself back then. What I knew is that I had this special friend that was the computer. And, nowadays I think people can learn anything they want on YouTube. They could vibe code whatever they want if they use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever it is. AI has completely changed everything. But back then, like if you asked me my advice 20 years ago, I would say find something that you don't hate doing every single day, because no matter what you do, it could be the thing you love the most, but it will become work. And there is no such thing as 100% loving what you do every day. Like growth is suffering, suffering is growth. And whether you want to be a musician or a basketball player or an entrepreneur like I am, all of them come with sacrifices. All of them come with suffering. There's no easy way to go from, zero to billionaire without the suffering. So I think what you have to figure out is, what is going to fit for you. Today is very different, because I think today we all have access to these little robots in our pockets. And these little robots in our pockets, I think, open up tremendous possibilities. So if I was an entrepreneur today, I think that I could do everything I've done in 20 years. I could probably do it in like half the time, because of what's possible with AI. I used to have to hire a team of 15 people to do what I can vibe code myself in a terminal in an hour now. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm happy to show you or the audience in a follow-up. But that's what I would say to that answer is, like, just find the thing that you are going to have more good days than bad days, and just lean into that and make your own destiny. Whether that means working for somebody else or starting your own thing, everything is in life comes with trade-offs. So you just have to figure out what trade-offs work for you. And that's the advice that I would give, that I think I can still follow to this day.
I like it. And one concept that stayed with me that I also read on your website is actually to find your own ikigai.
Yeah, definitely.
And something that makes you excited or gives you like a motivation to obviously wake up in the morning, because whether it's building your business, career, showing up on LinkedIn, it's not sunshine and rainbows every day. Sometimes you feel like it, sometimes not. So I'm glad to hear it from someone with such experience like you.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think the reality is, no matter who you follow, whatever the creator is that you want to tune into, it is not easy showing up every day and doing the reps. The difference between the people that you admire most and where you are at today in your life, the gap between that is that they did the work and you haven't done it yet. So that's the only reason that they're there where you are. It's often not because of their talent or their God-given abilities, right? A lot of times it just comes down to they put more reps in than you. When someone's like, oh, I want to be like Alex Ramosi, it's like, well, Alex Ramosi works 90 hours a week. It's like one of those things where he earned every single thing he's done, and people see him now. But I remember when he was posting awkward YouTube videos getting 3 views, and nobody knew who he was. He was just this bro. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I like it, and I agree. And it's a good example because people see successful, creators, people out there, and feels like it happened overnight, but no one remembers or no one sees those days when you're showing up and there was no one supporting you, no one cheering for you. So remember that even those that are way ahead of you, they also had to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete, as we spoke about technology, and obviously it's been, you said 20 years or how many years, and now we've got AI, as you mentioned before. Did you even have like idea before how it's going to develop, how it's going to progress? Obviously, it's been a long time and it's been a lot of progress. But back then, what did you think about the future, how it's going to develop?
So I've always been a bit of a futurist. I think I take that from science fiction movies, and I'm a big fan of the quote from Gibson, the science fiction writer, who says, like, the future's not evenly distributed. We're sort of, in many ways, I think many of us live in this small future that the max of everyone else don't live in. But what I would say to that point was, I remember when I first got my hands on a natural language processing, Python model. But it was before we had ChatGPT and before we had the LLM as we know it today. But these transformer models were out there. We had things like BERT from Google. We had different technologies. And I've always been a big believer that, like, where things were headed was going to be really interesting. I had a Tesla when they were earlier in market and promising self-driving, but they were kind of only half self-driving. Now they self-drive themselves, right? I have one now, and it's remarkable difference. But that being said, I think I always sort of imagine a world where humans and machines would be working together. If you go back to the Industrial Revolution, the steam train or steam engine and all these different things, every machine that man has ever made, we've had to work with, right? We're working with machines right now with no AI on this conversation. So what I tell people a lot is, like, I always imagine a world where humans and machines would be working together. I didn't think that we'd be where we're at today so quickly. I thought it was going to take more time, but I'm excited for it. I also thought they also said we'd have flying cars in the year 2000, and that didn't happen. So, that's here we are 26 years later. We still don't have flying cars yet, at least that I'm
Of
aware of.
course, yeah. They need to be ambitious and have big goals. And obviously, it's a bit of predicting and looking into the future. But what do you think it's going to look like? I don't know, in years or in decades. Have you got like any, whether it's development of AI or maybe like a sci-fi life? What do you think?
I think in the near future, every person with means is going to. I think unfortunately, there's going to be a massive flattening of the economy. Some people call that the K-shaped economy. I think high agency people that have access to the technology, like, I think LLM is the new water, LLM is the new electricity in a lot of ways. But I think that if you have access to this level of compute, if you have access to this level of technology, I think you're going to immediately be separated. So I don't think we're going to have a
Mhm.
middle class anymore. At least I live in America, but I don't think we're going to have a middle class. I think we're going to have this sort of like top percentile. It's going to look a lot like District 12 or like the Hunger Games or something. I mean, I don't mean to sound that dystopian. I actually take a fairly utopian view of this type of stuff. But what I would say is I think in the future, everyone will have access to personalized healthcare. I think everyone will have access to personalized operating system, personalized software. I think that the where we're headed with a, let's say, artificial general intelligence or augmented general intelligence and, soon to be AGI or super intelligence, I think that we're all headed to a world where we're creating the mechanical version of a hive mind that I believe already exists biologically, right? So I'm a pretty spiritual person. If you think about energy and how the universe works and how nature works, if you study biomimicry, you can see a lot of those principles actually starting to take shape in the technological landscape. So my philosophy is that if you have access to the means of the technology, I do believe that high agency people will be able to create a number of possibilities that we can't even fathom. A perfect example of that is recently Anthropic launched Claude Science. If you haven't checked it out, have you seen it?
Not cloud science. I thought that you mean the model that government restricted, but it's
No,
apparently something different.
that's Fable, which they brought back.
Yeah.
Fable's on there now. It was actually originally called Mythos. Fable's the sort of
Yes.
safer version of it. But putting that aside for a moment, I think they launched Claude Science. The beauty of Claude Science is if you have a basic subscription to Claude, which is just a couple dollars a month for most people, it's probably 5 or 6 coffees in terms of the cost, right? Again, overpriced coffee for a Starbucks. Sorry, but for the cost of 4 or 5 coffees, you can have access to Claude Science, which gives you access to all of the top research papers and all of the top biological things. So you can have someone on their phone or with a basic internet connection and a pretty rudimentary computer or Chromebook using the power of these super cluster computers, discovering the next cure for cancer, discovering the next thing. So I think that we're headed towards a world where we will have a personalized one-to-one approach to medicine, to technology, to the purchases that we make. I think that is definitely going to happen in our lifetimes if we're lucky enough to live that long. That's where I think, you asked the question about futurism. Like, that's where I think the futurism is going. I already see it with my ultra high net worth individual friends. We all have personal agents that are customized to us, that help us with our personal life and our work life. I'm going on vacation next week with my family. We're going to rural Wyoming, which I've never been to. And my personal agent, not my business agent, went out, built the entire itinerary from scratch, checked the weather every single day, made the packing list, suggested restaurants based on me and my wife's food preferences, and also talked about where would be fun places and not fun places to go for my 5-year-old son. To say that sounds powerful, but if someone listening to this might be like, okay, cool. What do you have? Is it OpenClaw? Is it an agent? Da, da. Put the technology aside for a moment. Think about the time that I would or you would have to spend preparing that in the past, right? In the old world, you'd have to do all that yourself. It would take hours and hours. It'd be frustrating. You'd be Google searching. You'd be pulling all these things up. In the newer world, that I'm privileged to have like an assistant that can do that work for me, but that would also take a ton of her time, right? So instead of eating up her time, spending a whole day making an itinerary, I'm able to, from my car, send a voice note to my agent, which then goes and does all this work for me. So that's, I think, where we're headed, is that every person is going to have that level of agency in their own life with their technology. And I don't think it's going to be something that only the wealthy and 1% have access to. So that's where I think things are headed. I do think that there's a light side and a dark side to anything, right? So I think that in a lot of ways, I have a lot of concern for security, privacy, the sovereign nature of AI. I worry quite a bit about, Thomas, to be totally candid. But I'm also, as a builder, I'm extremely excited because while you and I are having this conversation in this podcast, I have 7 different projects that are being worked on by independent agents in the cloud and just working. And that would be the equivalent of like a 30-person team in the past. And these are ideas, right? Like we still need people to create amazing things, but I can experiment rapidly now. You can experiment rapidly now with these technologies. You can use something like Riverside to cut and clip the content on this to hopefully find one interesting thing I say today.
No, there will be so many. It will be hard to go through all of those. But you actually kind of answered it, because I was about to ask you that you mentioned many positives and good things, but I was about to ask you about kind of the darker scenarios, because sometimes it also may look like, I'm sure that you know TV series Black Mirror, so like some kind of scenarios like that. But you then answered it that you see it both from positive side and also, of course, some negatives as well.
I think any technology that we've ever had, from fire to electricity to the internet, all comes with good and bad. I think, humanity in its purest form is going, we can choose to pick up something and use it as a device to open worlds, or we can choose to look at a technology to destroy worlds. Think of this, the ability to study and do things at the subatomic level, right? On one hand, we're creating nuclear bombs that destroy people. On the other hand, we're being able to have breakthroughs in medicine to save people's lives. Same technology, just with a different mindset and a different application. So I think I'm the most excited about right now is how can we use our agency? How can we use our technology? How can we use this to design the art of possible? And that's where the magic happens, is in the art of possible. But it all starts up here through the lens we look through.
Mm-hmm. I like it. And I like the mindset and approach to kind of both sides. And as we are discussing this bit, and of course, you are very knowledgeable about this field, not only theoretically, but practically as well. It makes me wonder, how do you manage to keep up with everything? Not only to know it, but also to test it by yourself and don't be overwhelmed by all the news and updates.
Well, you asked a couple questions there, so let me break those down. For one, I am overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed all the time. I've had ADHD since I was a kid. I was born with it. And so my brain is naturally like a squirrel being pulled to different things, or a laser pointer to a cat, right? Like I'm all like this. So I am overwhelmed all the time. And to answer your question on how I do it, I have developed a set of ways that I will consume, ways that I will curate, ways that I'll capture things, getting things out of my brain into my second brain, which I use a lot of technology for. But the way I stay on top of things is, one, I hire amazing, incredible people, right? Those people tell me what to pay attention to. That's number one. Number two is I've just been really efficient with technology. Anyone that has access to these technologies now, you can set up and tell your agents what you want them to pay attention to. So whether you use, ChatGPT Codex or Claude's Cowork, or whatever you want to use, any tool can do these kinds of things for you now. They have access to the internet. They can go pull things and read newsletters and tell you what to stay on top of. So what I tell people all the time, and is where your focus goes, your energy flows, right? So for me, I focus on innovation. I focus on possibility. So a lot of that comes to me, innovation, possibility. But that's how I stay on top of things, is, just a very mindful approach to where I put my time and attention. I am a habitual reader. I love to read. I love to experiment. I'm a tinkerer. So, my vocation is my vacation. It's one of my favorite Mark Twain quotes, Thomas. He said, find where your vocation and your vacation are the same thing, and you've had a good life, right? And that's, for me, my work and my personal life have a lot of overlapping things. I make things for fun. I'm a tinkerer. I'm a builder. So I'm able to stay in that zone of genius. You mentioned the concept ikigai, which is a concept that comes from Japan. It's sort of been bastardized by business people like ourselves. So I want to be clear. I'm not trying to appropriate someone else's culture here, but what I would say is ikigai, loosely translated to raison d'etre, or your reason for being, when looked at in its purest form, is all about this idea of where you add value for your community, what lights you up, what brings you that positive energy. That was a sort of original text as it was designed. I think us business people have bastardized it and said, okay, what do you love to do? What does the world need? And what will people pay you for? And we found a different Venn diagram, because business people, we just love Venn diagrams, right? We're just a little too high on our own supply. But I think for me, that purpose is really about possibility. It's about elevating human potential. And one of the things I love about you, Thomas, and this why I accepted this podcast thing was just, the authentic nature of how you reached out. It wasn't a spammy AI written message. I get hundreds of those a day. It was a genuine
Me too.
curiosity, and that's why I was like, yeah, let's talk. But if it was one of those spammy things, it would have never even came to me. So I think the future is about human creativity, collaboration. That's how I stay on top of the world. And that's how I bring the passion I bring to everything I do.
I want to say firstly, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I like the concept that you discussed and you mentioned, because it's obviously very important to have your why that, as mentioned before, makes you excited to wake up in the morning in the first place. And one of my favorite things to just keep in mind is to enjoy the journey. You said that you are a thinker, that you like to explore, be creative, and have fun. And if you have fun, if you enjoy it, it just makes everything more enjoyable and easier to show up. So I think I like your mindset and the way you approach it.
Thanks. No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think mindset's everything, right? We can choose to be happy or we can choose to be unhappy. And the way I look at it is there's a really great book that I love, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And it's a beautiful book about like suffering, right? The guy's in a concentration camp for one of the most horrible possible things that could happen. And he finds joy in just looking out into the trees, or he finds joy and happiness. So I think, my philosophy, I try, I meditate every day. I try my best to have the right mindset. But like, let's be honest, like we all have shitty days. We all kind of get stuck in our own bullshit, like, oh, I spilled my $4 coffee on myself. It's like, do you hear yourself right now? And sometimes we just have to snap out of it. But yeah, listen, I try to be 1% better every day. I try to show up. I try to own my shit, and there's plenty of that, as my wife will tell you. But yeah, that's it.
I like it. And I think it's a great inspiration for me as well. A quick note before we continue. One of the things I've realized from hosting this podcast is that I spend a lot of time thinking about the conversations long after they end. That's one of the reasons I started Unproduced, a solo podcast where I share ideas, lessons, observations, and questions I'm still figuring out myself. If you'd like to check it out, you'll find the link in the description. Now, back to the episode. And Pete, we discussed your business before and now AI, but I know that you are involved in multiple ventures or multiple roles. So to give us a perspective and to let the audience know, what are some other projects or businesses that you are involved in?
Yeah, so for those that aren't aware, so I have a holdings company, which is basically just a fancy rich person term for you own a bunch of companies and you can't make up your fucking mind. That's what it translates to. But jokes aside, I've been building out what I refer to as a hub and spoke model of companies for a long time, which is essentially, when you think about, I'm here in America, so I know we have an audience all over the world, but why did Amazon buy Whole Foods, right? They bought them because they needed physical distribution hubs, right, for their e-commerce business. They bought them for a number of other reasons. Why does the company that does a lot of shipping buy a shipping company? Because they can sort of control the whole ecosystem, right? If you can control the ecosystem, you control the customer journey, you control the customer across the board, right? So it's the more you can lever it, the better. That being said, I started as a brand experience firm. Digital Surgeon still exists to this day. We do work with amazing, credible companies. In doing branding and storytelling, I realized we needed development capabilities. So we built on a technology company. And then I realized we need consulting capabilities. So then we built on a consulting capability. One of the things I learned about myself in 20 years of being an entrepreneur is that it's better to be, in my mind, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. So what I like to do is find the experts in each related thing. So to answer your question, one of my newest companies, it's about a year old now. I've been at this company for, in some way, shape, or form as an investor or a collaborator for a few years, but I basically am building a company called GPC. GPC is an AI consulting company. It has two sides to it. So we have the number one AI education newsletter on the internet. So my partner, Ruben Asid, has Hot AI on Substack. So that's our AI education. We put out a ton of free material to people all over the world. We're reaching, I think, about 1 million people each week right now with a combined list of over 800,000. And that number will grow even faster based on its current trajectory. So that we took that business, combined it with another business that we had together, which is AI consulting. So what GPC is we help companies adopt AI. So what we do is we come in, we train, adopt, deploy, maintain AI solutions. And what I mean is not just like fancy AI agents and like the bullshit they agree about thing. It's like we come in, we sit down with a company, We understand how they do business and we help them redesign the future of work. And we do that through a mix of people and process and platforms. And that company is growing like crazy right now. We're hiring tons of people. We're signing the biggest companies in the world and helping them reimagine work, because AI is not another technology. AI is a fundamental shift in how we behave as human beings. The way that the future of labor used to be human capital, now the future of labor is leverage, and leverage is about human capital, token capital, and the combined interchange of value exchange. And that's why we're seeing, for few person billion-dollar valuations in companies now, because what's possible if you have the right leverage, you don't require, thousands of people like you did 100 years ago, right? Now, let's be clear. Anybody who tells you you're going to have AI only companies, they're wrong, right? We need people because humans have taste, discernment, and judgment. And these machines still require a lot of that. We're a ways away off from the super AI that you hear about in Black Mirror that can do everything and be the CEO of its own company. I don't think we're there yet. I hope I'm dead by then, but I hope that.
Maybe you'll live forever by then. One never knows.
I don't know. I saw something that the guy, what was his name? The Brian Johnson guy apparently is.
Oh, he's got some. He's sick, right? I saw
Yeah,
it. I think today.
Yeah, he's sick right now, which is kind of a bummer to hear that, because I think a lot of us looked out and were like, oh, he's figured out a way to figure it all out. I really enjoyed that Netflix documentary. Certainly a interesting way to live your life, but hope he gets well soon. So.
I think so too. And it's probably obvious question, but you said that business is growing because of the AI. And how do you see that like for the future? Do you think it's going to grow even more as people realize that AI is growing and it's important? Because sometimes people think, oh, it's late to jump to AI, which I think it's never late. But what's your
we're in the first inning of this, Thomas. I mean, we haven't even started yet, really, when it comes to where we're at with the AI workforce. I think that the shift that we're having right now, that's currently happening, it's very easy to read a headline and think that everyone's on AI. I walked into a 3,000 person or few thousand person company the other day for one of our clients, and I go and I wrote about this in my newsletter. If you haven't followed it, check it out. I have a free newsletter on Substack, so we'll definitely drop a link for folks. But basically, I write every Tuesday, and essentially, I go to a company and I'm thinking I'm going to go talk about context engineering and all this other fancy stuff, and literally a person raises their hand and is like, asks the most basic question. And I was floored, because in my mind, I'm like, this is the most innovative company. They have all these AI products. They're doing all these things. And there's so many people who don't understand it. So I think that the reality is the promise of AI and what AI actually delivers, the gap in the space in between right now, it's not technology, it's adoption. It's an understanding fundamentally of how work and how value gets created. And I think that that's what we have to really focus on first, is like, what is the nature of work and how is work changing? Because the answer is not replace a human with a robot. The answer is not replace a workflow with an automation. The answer is understanding, how does a company create value, right? All a company is, at the most basic level, is revenue, profit, costs, capital, right? What is the capital? Human capital, financial capital, token capital. You need customers buying something. It's a product, it's a service, it's an experience. There's an exchange of value, right? If you think about currency, the root word of current, if you go back to the etymology back in the day with language, root word of current is to flow. If something doesn't change hands or flow, it's not value. And that is why the basic economic principles, supply, demand, equilibrium, these are concepts we learned about in school that are very, very important. But most people don't want to talk about those things because they sound too smart. So what they want to do is they want to say, like, how do you make money? How do you 10x your people? And that's where I think that we have to reimagine what is work.
And based on your experience, how do people usually react to AI? Because there's like some people that are afraid of it, obviously, because they fear that it's going to take their job, that it's going to replace them.
Everyone is afraid of AI, Thomas. I'm afraid of AI. You're afraid of it. And if you say otherwise, you're lying. We're all afraid of it, because right now you either feel threatened by it, you feel thrilled by it, or there's a thing that's... Yeah, exactly. It's likely both. We are all afraid of AI, myself included, right? These things are able to do so many more things way better, way faster, way cheaper than we can do as humans. So what we have to understand is, you know, the painter hated the photographer hated the photoshopper hates the AI generated image, right? We're in this thing now where your generation, you look a bit younger than me, your generation hates overproduced content that I look at, the 8K perfect stuff, perfect makeup. You want real, you want authentic, right? And then Gen Alpha doesn't want to see AI slop. They don't want to see AI generated content. They want to see pimples and mistakes and, things falling down all over the place, right? So I think what's happening is that people are revolting against AI in a lot of cases. So I think that, like anything, everything in life is about moderation. It's about finding and tuning the dials on what's right for you, what's right for your customer, what's right for your business, what's right for your market. And I don't believe that they are identical anywhere.
Mm-hmm. I like it. That's interesting. And also, you don't obviously know how it's going to progress, how it's going to evolve. We discuss something, who knows, in a few months or years, it may be completely different. So it was interesting take for sure.
Yeah, and one of my favorite quotes, Thomas, is we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can. Sorry, we overestimate what we can do in 10 years and underestimate what we can do in one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good.
I think it's a Bill Gates quote. Again, I'm not sure who said it, but someone smarter than me said it for sure.
Yeah. And Pete, we could be discussing that for way longer, but something that I definitely need to ask is obviously podcasting, because that's my passion as well. So you've spoken with some amazing guests on your show. If I'm not mistaken, you probably took a little break from podcasting. Am I correct?
Did, yeah. So the short version is we had a great podcast called Ford Obsessed. We started remotely, then brought it in person post COVID. Myself and one of my co-founders, one of my other companies, we got busy. Him and his wife were having new kids. We're both running different businesses at the time. We're here in New Haven, Connecticut, so we were preferring to record in person, and just the energy of it, right? I think right now we had a fantastic producer who I absolutely adore. And then him and his wife moved to Germany. When they moved, I tried to do remote for a little bit. I did a couple of remote episodes. I haven't quite figured out energy that I'm after yet. And it was a bit of a lost leader. So yeah, we did take a bit of a break. So I've been doing much more guest appearances, which is what brings me here today. But I love podcasting, love conversations like we're having today. I'm going to be thinking about this chat for the rest of the day. So thank you for that. And, but yeah, it's, the plan is probably to start it back up again in the future. But right now, I've been really enjoying having the extra space to do other things.
Completely understood. I was about to ask, how can you manage everything?
The answer to that is hire great people.
Yeah, that is true. And have you got like a dream guest? Someone, because for example, from the people that you've spoken with, some part is someone who's well known, such a big name, but who's like your dream guest or favorite guest?
It's a wonderful question. I mean, dream guests. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, right? I would love to have Jensen Huang on an episode. I'd love to have Elon Musk on the show, Sam Altman, Dario from Anthropic. I mean, all these sort of breakthrough minds. I'd love to have folks like Sarah Blakely, creator of Spanx. She's brilliant. Whitney, who's, I think she was the founder of Tinder and then Bumble, just like understanding how different folks are doing that. So I think for me, it's less about the names and it's more about the way that people think, right? So I would be delighted to have a scientist on the show that's doing work in cancer care and helping with that, but you've never heard of them. Like in my experiences, some of the best conversations I've had happened at the grocery store or at a coffee shop, and you would never know who those people are. They don't have a million followers on Instagram, but it's just a raw human conversation. So I think one of the things that's challenging about the podcast business is you're chasing views if you're trying to do it. So when my partner and I did it, we did it as a labor of love. We weren't really selling a ton of sponsors. We did a couple occasional sponsorships here and there, but it's expensive to run a podcast. I think we were spending, we spent a good amount of money every year to do it. I mean, it was some salaries and some tech and then your own time. But yeah, I hope that is what you're looking for.
Of course, and you obviously mentioned like your finances, but also times and management and everything around it. I know what it's like, so it's actually great to hear it from someone who's got experience. And Pete, one of the questions that people sometimes ask me is like, for example, like one piece of advice or something like a recurring theme or pattern that you see across the guests. So if I was to ask you this question as someone who spoke with many people on the podcast, is there like one takeaway that you would give to people that you learned?
I mean, you got to be more specific. That's a very open-ended question.
It's like, let's say you spoke with many amazing people, and maybe is there like one recurring theme that you see across multiple episodes that helps people to progress in career, in their life, maybe be happier?
I think it comes down to mindset and agency. Those are the two words that I would say. The mindset that you operate under will free you or will trap you. The how high agency you are will mean your ability to shape your own reality around you. I would say mindset agency is how I would answer that question, period. If I had to add another sentence to that, what I would say is know thyself first and foremost. Self-awareness is mission critical, I think, to anyone successful. The more self-aware you are, the less delusional you are, the more likely you will be able to function in society for whatever it might be. That's where I would start primarily. What I've noticed, especially with entrepreneurs and having so many on my show, a lot of them went through different mental health challenges. Like I said, a lot of suffering, sometimes self-imposed. Chips on shoulders equals chips in pockets, right? So every entrepreneur I know, we feel like we have something to prove to ourselves, to our families, to the world, to the ex, that scorned us, whatever it is. We're all out to prove something. I think fear, greed, and love drive human primal behavior. So if you understand how to play with the levers of fear, greed, and love, and hopefully love more than fear and greed, anything's possible. Might not be overnight, but anything's possible. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I like it. And I also like what you said, because it's worth reminding that even those people that are successful or that are way ahead of you are still just people that also have fears, have insecurities, doubts. Everyone does that. So it's good to know that, like, from those that are way ahead of you.
Yeah.
Then, Pete, just to be aware of time, I want to ask you kind of lighter questions. So what is it actually that you like doing in your free time, or what are some of your hobbies?
I love spending time with my son. I have a 5-year-old son. Love spending time with my family. My wife's awesome. We travel a lot. We love experiences. I'd say outside of family, I'm really big into art, design, and technology. So I love to play with the intersection of art, design, and technology, whether it's through exploring new AI technologies, vibe coding. I do spend a lot of time vibe coding these days. Just a really fun way to kind of express myself, make ideas in my head come real. Those are mostly my hobbies. I mean, I'd say for me, it's spend time with friends, spend time vibe coding. I don't think I have any extraordinary hobbies. I wouldn't call meditation a hobby. I'd call meditation a thoughtful practice that's a part of my life. But I have been meditating for thousands of days in a row consecutively. I'm very proud of that. I think I'm going on about 9 years of not missing a day, and that's a big accomplishment for me, given what got me into that and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. If you don't mind expanding on it a bit more, is it like you do, for example, a few minutes in the morning or in the evening, or what's your approach to meditation?
It depends. I'd say when I'm in my best, I'm doing it 2 times a day, but I'd say my daily practice typically is when I'm done for the day. Usually I'll do a sit at night. Ideally it's like 20 minutes, but sometimes I'd say the lowest I've done is just a couple minutes, just to make sure I'm keeping up I call it the Cinderella habit, making sure I don't turn into a pumpkin. But I make sure that I meditate every day before the clock strikes midnight. And it's a big part of my practice. I'd say it's mostly mindfulness meditation. I've been recently exploring Zazen and TM as well. But I'd say right now I get a lot of value out of just like a relaxed sit. I recently purchased a infrared sauna, and I've been doing it in the sauna, which is a little bit harder to get the true Zen-like behavior when you're sweating your face off. But I've definitely been appreciating that combination of kind of sweating out the toxins and that sort of thing. I would say I'm very much a big fan of contrast therapy. So I think what's really awesome for me is I don't have a cold plunge in my house, but right now I'm probably going to get one soon. But, sauna, cold plunge meditation for me is like a trifecta. A little life hack that I've been doing, Thomas, that you might appreciate is like trying to get at least an hour a day that's just for me. So not for my family, not for my clients, not for my team, but just for me. I don't always get that hour by itself. Sometimes it's 15 minutes here or 15 minutes there, but I try to add those things up where an hour for me a day is my time. And that's been helping my mental health. It's been helping my moods, my attitude. But yeah, everything's work in progress.
I like it, and it's a great reminder. Don't underestimate or neglect your mental health, because if you cannot function, nothing is really going to work. And I'm proud of you about the streak, so well done on that.
Yeah, I'll keep it up for sure.
And I just wanted to say that when you mentioned before technology, creativity, and that you like building things, I can safely say that looking at whether it's ventures or businesses or any projects that you created, when I look at whether it's website or presence on social media, it always looks like really beautiful, top-notch websites, beautiful design. So you are a real pro, and I'm a big fan. Really well done.
I really, really appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's like I said, I have an amazing team, and I'm just obsessed with great design. I think that there's not enough beauty in this world, and I think we need more of it if we pay attention. So I'm just doing my best to try to put it out there.
Really well done. And you mentioned it before, Pete, but what are some of your favorite books?
Well, we'll need a separate podcast just for that. So I'm a huge fan of Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act. I'm a big, there's so many books. I mean, I love biographies or autobiographies. So I love memoir type books. So Shoe Dog was a great one from Phil Knight about a story with Nike. I love almost any biography Walter Isaacson writes, whether it's the Steve Jobs biography or whatever. I'm a big fan of kind of stepping into the minds of people that are interesting from all walks and talks of life, not just one industry. So those are some great books. What other books? Yeah, there's the classic ones. Jim Collins, Good to Great, I think is a fantastic book. I'm trying to read my bookcase.
Men's Search for Meaning before.
Yeah, that was a good book. I wouldn't say it was one of my favorites. That book was like hard to read because it was like felt maybe sad. But yeah, that book tracks. There's a lot of authors I follow. I mean, one of my partners in our venture studio that we built an app for him is Matthew Dix, the famous author, and he wrote Story Sell and Storyworthy. I think those books are fantastic books that anyone that wants to connect with people deeper should read, because they're basically like life books about business, not business books about life. So I think they're really good. I highly recommend his stuff. But yeah, no, I wish I was in my other office because I have a whole bookcase behind me. I could have just been calling them out. But yeah, those are the ones in mind.
Yeah, but it makes one wonder if it's also on your mind to write your own book one day.
I am writing a book right now. I'm writing a book right now. It's all around the topic of the lens and how you can shift the lenses that you look through. So that's been something I'm pretty deep into that book right now. I haven't decided if I'm going to self-publish or go with a publisher. So if you are a publisher and you see this and you're interested in that book, I am basically taking 20 years of my stories, my journey, and also the research I've done on how anyone can be creative and anyone can change and transform their life by changing the mindset and the lens that they look through. So I've been building a series of apps and a stack around that, and also been deeply writing that the old-fashioned way. And that's been great. But yeah, no, thank you for asking. I'm going to be launching that soon. And I'd say for those that want to get a glimmer into my mind, not a hard sell here because it's a free newsletter too. I have free tier and a paid tier, but the free tier is great. I write a Substack, just Pete Sena on Substack. I write that, every Tuesday. It's been going out, and that's been keeping me honest and in a lot of ways. And I've been enjoying that. And I think you'll find a glimmer of some of the things to come and what the book is going to be about.
I'm happy to hear that. Firstly, impressed that you're writing the book. Well done, and we'll be excited when it's out. And as you mentioned, Substack, I was about to ask if you can summarize or mention where people can find you, follow you, and potentially promote any of your services as well.
No, I appreciate that. Again, I'm just grateful for you listening to this interview and for supporting Thomas. But I would say how you can support me is follow me on Substack. I'm Pete Sena on Substack. I'm Pete Sena on LinkedIn, Pete Sena on Twitter. So mostly Pete Sena on most channels. I'd say the best channel to connect with me is probably LinkedIn or Substack, because I check those very actively and often. I'm a longtime Twitter lover. Obviously, I go on X almost every day. I'm not posting as much as I'd like to anymore on there, but I do have a decent following over there that I want to reactivate. But yeah, I just really want to say thanks for the support. Thanks for having me on, and excited to see the episode.
I thank you, Pete. But before I let you go, please, one more question. If there is anything I forgot to ask you or anything that you would like to leave the audience with.
No, I think you nailed it, man.
Thank you. Then I thank you. I appreciate it. Not only I enjoy the content that you create, obviously big inspiration with everything that you created. Now this chat only confirmed it that I also really like your mindset and everything. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it, and I'll be wishing you all the best. And one day I'll be looking forward to seeing your books on the shelves. So thank you very much, Pete.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure you get a copy of it when it's ready.
Thanks for listening to Produced by with Tomen. Check the show notes for all the links, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your feedback. Speak soon.